Hi everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to show you my TBR for the Animal Companion / Mythological Creature Readathon that is being hosted by Elliot Brooks in the entire month of March. So I will link her announcement of this readathon down below. Definitely make sure to check it out because of course it's quite obvious that we're going to read fantasy books that have an animal companion or a mythological creature in the story. But besides that, Elliot Brooks also added some extra prompts that make us diversify our reading a little bit. For example, there is a prompt for LGBTQ representation, which I thought was really nice and what really helped me to see which type of books I really don't have yet and I should look into a little bit further. What is also really nice is that in her description box there is a link to a Google document, and there you have all the prompts and then the books that everybody who wants to can add that fit those prompts. And that was really helpful because I really wanted to participate in this readathon. First of all, because Elliot Brooks is one of my favorite booktubers, but also because animal companions are my favorite trope in adult fantasy by far. But I was a little bit nervous whether or not I would have enough books on my physical TBR to participate. But looking through the Google document, I actually saw that I had far more than I thought, because a lot of these books I actually didn't know that they had an animal companion or a mythological creature, because often they are not really very important in the story, so you don't get that information from just the back of the book. So that was really helpful to look into that document. So definitely check that one out. Now, before I jump into my TBR, I do want to give a little bit of information if you don't know me yet. I am a big mood reader and I normally don't do monthly TBRs because they stress me out a little bit. What I want to read in the beginning of the month isn't per se what I want to pick up in the second week of the month. So what I normally do is seasonal TBRs where I pick 5 books and I have 3 months time to read those 5, which gives me enough options to pick other books up on the fly if I feel like I want to read those instead. So I'm not going to show you 5 books and I will read those 5 books next month. What I did was I looked over at the document and over at my physical TBR, and I had a number of books that would fit the readathon. And then I skimmed that down a little bit by looking at the books that I am really excited to pick up ASAP at this moment. And that left me with 11 books in total. Now I will also read 2 other books that do not fit this readathon in order for another buddy read / readathon that I also want to participate. So that would give a total of 13 books. Now that's too much for me. I will never read 13 books in 1 month. But what I'm going to do is I will read those 2 other books regardless. And then everything else that I pick up next month has to be one of these 11 books that I'm going to show you in a minute. So at the least, I think I will read 5 books of that list. But it could go up to 8 if I have a very good reading month. But that still gives me the freedom to pick up whatever I want from those 11 books and not have a very tight schedule. So without further ado, I am going to show you these 11 books now. And the first book I have on the list is Age of Assassins by R.J. Barker. This is the first book in the Wounded Kingdom trilogy, and the entire trilogy was actually on my TBR for this year, so I'm very happy that it has an animal companion or a mythological creature in there, because this is, first of all, a book that I didn't know, and I found it on the Google document, and I thought, oh, okay, that's nice to know. In this book, you follow an assassin's apprentice who is being hired to protect the heir to the throne because another unknown assassin has been given the job to assassinate this king. So that's why it said here on the cover, to catch an assassin, use an assassin. And when I first talked about this book on my yearly TBR, I actually said that I thought that this was going to be very high action packed and that this was probably going to be what a lot of people expect from the Farseer trilogy but didn't get there. But then someone said, no, it's actually a little bit more like the Farseer trilogy, which really piqued my interest because the Farseer trilogy is one of my favorite books and series of all time. So I'm very excited to pick this one up, hopefully next month. For the prompts, I think that this is adult fantasy. I think that this is European inspired, and it was listed among disabilities. As I said before, don't know what the animal companion will be, so I don't know if it fits in land, air, sea or beyond, but I'll see that when I've read it. Next up, I have a book that I actually don't know that much about, and that is Malice by John Gwynne. This is the first book in the Fateful and the Fallen quartet, and I've actually heard some good things about this series, but I wasn't going to pick it up anytime soon until I found the entire hardback set for a very decent price, so I decided, let's pick it up, I'll read it eventually. And when I then shared my book haul, my Instagram stories, a lot of people said, pick up Malice, which surprised me because I knew that some booktubers loved it, but I didn't know that it was so universally loved. And then I saw it on the Google document for animal companions. So I figured that was a sign that I should give it a try ASAP. As I said, I don't know what it's about. I think it's quite your traditional fantasy, and I do know that there's quite a lot of action scenes. So I'm kind of on the fence if I will like this, but I definitely want to give it a try. In terms of the prompts, I know that it's adult fantasy and it's European inspired, but that's about it, because this is another one that I didn't know had any animal companions or mythological creatures in the story. So I'm very excited to figure out what's the deal with that. Then I have another first in a series. I will definitely have to have some months, April, maybe June, where I only read continuations of series because I'm going to start a lot of them in March. But we're not going to think about that right now. The next book that I have is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is actually the first book in the Daevabad trilogy, and it is centered around Nari, who is a con woman in 18th century Cairo and who doesn't really believe in magic. But then she accidentally summons a djinn. So yeah, you kind of have to believe in magic after that happens. I think in terms of prompts, this one fits African inspired or African based even. It's adult fantasy again, and since it's djinn, it definitely fits the beyond prompt. I don't know anything more than that. I know that there are a little bit of mixed responses towards this series, but it's something different than what I normally read, so I am quite excited to give it a try. And this is actually one of the only series that I don't have the entire trilogy yet, so if I like it, it might take me a while to pick up the second one, but I'm still very excited for this first one. Then I finally have a standalone, and that is The Black Swan by Mercedes Lackey. This is, as I said, a standalone, it's adult fantasy, and it's actually a fairy tale retelling for the Swan Lake. Now, I love everything that has anything to do with fairy tales, so I think that I will really love this book, and especially the Swan Lake, because I watched a lot of retellings as a child on DVD. So I think that I will really enjoy this one, and it just came in the mail, so I'm happy that at least this one arrived in time. I think that most people know the Swan Lake, the story that you have this evil sorcerer who changes young maidens into swans, but anything more than that kind of slipped my memory, so that's why I'm even more excited to pick this one up. In terms of prompts, this is, I think, European inspired, but more Eastern European, so I think that that might be a little bit interesting. It's a little bit different than your normal medieval England setting, so there's that. And since we have swans, I'm also guessing that this will be air, but also sea, even though it's not sea but it's water, so I'm going to count it as that. Other than that, I don't know. Maybe there's going to be some mental health issues discussed here, but I'm not quite sure if they will go into that deep enough to count it as a prompt. Next up, I have Skull Soren by Brian Staveley. This is a standalone novel in the same world as his Chronicle of the Unhung Throne trilogy, which I read last year and loved a lot. So if you're looking for a grim dark series that definitely fits this readathon, then I definitely recommend that you check that trilogy out. Now, the story of this standalone is centered around a character of the original trilogy, so I won't go into the plot too much because I think that might be a little bit spoilery. But this is Asian-centered, or at least Asian-inspired. It is an epic fantasy, so it is a whole new world, but especially the religions are inspired by some Asian ones that were present in the past and now still, which I really enjoyed. And there will definitely be a godlike creature in this, so the Beyond prompt is also ticked off. In the original trilogy, you had these big warbirds, but since the person that we're following in this standalone is from a different faction in the Empire, I don't know if these will be present here as well, but if that's the case, then also the air prompt will be ticked off. And in the original trilogy, there was LGBTQ representation, which I think will also be present in this one. So I'm quite excited to pick this one up. I love Brian Staveley's writing, so I should have actually picked this one up way sooner, and I hope that I'll get to it in March. Next up, I have another standalone novel, and that is Raise the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. This is also the author that has written the Queens of Rentia trilogy. I haven't read that one myself, but I know that Elliot Brooks quite liked that one, so if I like this standalone, then that is a series that I will pick up next. In this book, we follow two women who are going to enter this race where they have to ride monsters. The older woman is going to be the trainer and the younger one is going to be the rider, and both of them have a lot at stake and they really need to win the competition and get money. For the older woman, she needs to have the money in order to keep her daughter, because otherwise the temple will take her daughter away. And the younger woman needs this money in order to gain independence, because her dominant family wants to marry her off to a very bad husband. I think this is Asian inspired. I'm not quite sure. I'll see if I finish the book if it's true, but I think so. And I'm also quite sure that there might be some talk about mental health, because as I talked about that very dominant family, I hope that that will be discussed a little bit further in the book. For the animal companion / mythological creature, I think this is going to tick off the land prompt, but because there is some talk that these monsters are actually reincarnations of bad spirits, I think that also the beyond prompt can be ticked off. I'm quite interested in this book. It's a standalone, and I'm always a little bit happy when I can read a standalone and not be invested in a big series, so hopefully I like it. Next up, I do have another first of a trilogy, and that is The Thousand Deaths of Arthur Ben by Tyler Whitesides. This is the first book in the Kingdom of Grit trilogy, and in this series you follow Arthur Ben, who is a master thief, and he gets hired to steal a very important object from the king. In order to succeed, he of course assembles a band of master forgers, thieves, disguisers, etc. And he goes and tries to steal this object. But while he is at it, he starts realizing that this is not only important for him and his fame, but that he is actually the last hope of human civilization. I think that this will be quite interesting. I enjoy heist stories, but I haven't read a lot of them. So it would be nice if this is going to be another series that I can dive into and that's a little bit more action-packed than what I normally read. I have heard that there's a dragon in these books, so I think that it will be much more epic than I originally thought, but other than that I don't really know a lot about it. So for prompts it's going to be adult and it's going to be air, I'm certain about that, but I don't know if this is influenced by a certain part of the world. It probably is, but maybe sometimes with very epic stories you don't really see the influence that clearly. However, I'll see that when I read it. Next up I have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is again the first in a trilogy called The Poppy War that I really wanted to read, and for some reason I haven't started it yet, so I think that March would be the perfect timing to do so. I don't know too much about these books other than that we follow Rin, who is the protagonist here, and that she enters the military and that we follow her journey. I have heard that some people don't really like Rin as a character, so I'm quite excited to see what I think about her. Other than that, I know that some sequences of these books are definitely inspired by things that happened in real life during World War II, and that there's definitely a trigger warning for rape. So I do want you to know, I think that most people already know that, but to be aware of that when you jump into this trilogy. It's grimdark, so it can be quite traumatizing for some people if you don't know that, I think. And because of that, I also think that there might be a little bit of talk about mental health, although I don't know if in these books they really focus on that aspect more than about other things in war. So for prompts, I think that this is definitely Asian inspired or Asian influenced. I've heard that there is a demigod present, so beyond, and maybe, as I said before, mental health, but I have to see that after I've read the book. Then I finally have a continuation for the series, and that is The Bitter Twins by Jen Williams. This is the second book in the Winnowing Flame trilogy, the first one being The Ninth Rain. If you've heard of that first title, then that's probably because Elliot Brooks really loves that book. I love it as well. It was in my top 10 of 2020. And in order to tell you what it's about, that's a little bit difficult because I think that most of the enjoyment comes from figuring out the world yourself. I had a little bit of Witcher feels from this first book. I think if you like The Witcher, you're probably also going to like this series. But what I can say is that the animal companion / mythological creatures play a very big role in this series, which isn't always the case, but for this one they are very important for the plot. So if you like that, then definitely give these books a try. I really want to jump into the second one. I should have done so long ago, so I think that March will be the perfect timing to do so. In terms of prompts, we definitely had some LGBTQ representation in the first one, so I hope that this will also be the case here. There was also some mental health struggle with Noon, which I hope will be discovered a little bit more in the second book, because I really liked that aspect as well. And as I said, we have mythological creatures and animal companions which play a very big role. So you actually have land, air, but also beyond. And I don't know if sea or water will be present here. I don't think that will be what that was present in the first book, but you never know if the second book expands a little bit on that. I don't know if this is inspired by a certain region in our world, because as I said, it's really strange, this book. There's a lot of things that you need to discover on your own, but I didn't really see some similarities straight away. So if that's the case and you know that, please let me know in the comments down below, but I don't think so. Then the last book I'm going to talk about that I physically own, I just talked about Witcher, and I actually still need to read Season of Storms, which is the prologue in this series. So I already read the 2 short stories, and I read the main series, which is 5 books long, but I was always a little bit anxious to pick up the prologue, because this is published a lot later than the other books. But I've actually heard in the meantime some positive reviews about this. I'm very excited to meet Geralt of Rivia and Yennefer again. I really like them as a couple, even though not everybody does, I do, so I hope that that's present in this book as well. And other than that, I think it's quite your typical fantasy in terms of the prompts that we are getting to know in this readathon, because it's definitely European inspired. And for the animal companion, it's only land, even though in the original books or in the previous books that I have read, there is definitely also a dragon in some instances and some other animals as well. So maybe that's going to be present in this prologue, but I'm not sure. I have to read it and see. And then the last book that I have on my TBR is one that I actually don't already own, because I ordered it a long while ago, and I really think that this is cursed. I ordered it a long while ago from Book Depository, and then they sent me a message after 3 weeks or so, like, oh, we don't have it in stock, it turns out, so we're going to cancel your order. Then I ordered it from another site, and they also didn't have it in stock after a couple of weeks of me waiting. And now I ordered it from Book Depository again a month ago. So I really hope that it arrives in time. If that happens, I'm going to read it straight away. It's highly anticipated, and I really want to start it because I think that I will love it. And that is The Sacred Hunt Duology by Michelle West. In this book you follow hunter lords, and they have an agreement with the hunter god that they are allowed to hunt in his woods and keep the game in order to feed their people. But in return, once every year, this hunter god is going to hunt one of these hunter lords in his woods. The hunter lords have a special connection with one commoner, but they also have a special connection with a hunting dog. So you have a wood-like setting, you have a godlike creature, and you have dogs as animal companions. Everything says that I will love this book, and I'm going to be really gutted if that isn't the case, but I think that I will. In order for the prompts that we are discussing right now, I think that this will be pretty basic, because I think it will be a European setting. I'm not quite sure, but a forest-like setting, I would be surprised, pleasantly surprised, if it's going to be a little bit more than that, but I don't think it will. And then we do have beyond as well, and land. I don't think we will have air or sea, but we'll have to see and figure that one out. So those were all the books that I have on my TBR. I actually have some books that I've already read, but that I think would really fit this TBR and that I would like to personally recommend to you guys. If I have a non-spoiler review for the books, then I will link them down below, but I will just quickly go over them. And those are Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb, and also the Life Ship Traders Trilogy by her, the Winter Night Trilogy by Catherine Arden, the Seven Waters Trilogy by Juliette Morelier. Then we also have the Chronicle of the Unhewn Throne. We have the Story of Silence, which is a pretty new release, so definitely check that one out if you want. And there's definitely LGBTQ representation there in a very unique way. Then we of course have Mistborn Era 1 and Mistborn Era 2. And we also have A Song of Ice and Fire, which is quite logic. I don't think that anyone hasn't thought about that one. But one that I really want to mention is The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Kornicek. This is a new release. It came out the 9th of February this year. And if you like Circe, this is very similar to Circe, but it follows Norse mythology. But in my opinion, it's way better than Circe. So please pick that one up. I cannot recommend it enough. And there are both animal companions as godlike creatures present there. Much more the animal companion part than it was present in Circe, in my opinion. And then we also have The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia McKillop, which is a fairy tale that is written by her originally. It's a very short and light book, so definitely give that one a look as well. Those are the ones that I would recommend to you. Please let me know if you are going to participate in this readathon. Do you have a TBR, or are you just going to swing it and see at the end of the month if you have magic? And if you are not going to participate, then please let me know what you think about my TBR. I hope you enjoyed the video and see you next time. Bye!